Hey guys, welcome to this video about the new particle system in Cinema 4D. I was playing around with those new tools for a few days now, and this is what I came up with. So I decided to make a little tutorial to show you how I did that. If you wanna reverse engineer what I did, or if you just wanna support the channel, you can buy this file from my gumroad page. I'm gonna leave a link in the description for that. So as you can see, I have my own little particle layout here. I was following Chris Schmidt's presentation about the particles, and he recommended that if I go to the standard layout here, I can just go to simulate and open up all of those palettes here. Then go to window, customization, and command manager. Then maybe right click here and go to customize palettes. So maybe dog that over here. Just drag and drop a group separator, adding those, new group separator. And so you can add all of those. So in my group, I also added the matrix and the tracer object here and some of the forces here. And on top here, I added the geometry only. So to get this one, you go to filter and dog that and customize palette. And I just want to get the geometry here and I place that on top. And if you want to save this layout, you just go to Windows, Customization. Here you have Save Layout As, and here you can call these particles, for example, and save. So when you open up Cinema now, you can go to Particles and you have your custom layout. I'm gonna hit Ctrl D. So I want this project to be 25 FPS, and I'm gonna right away add some frames here. So let's start with a new basic emitter and call that start and call the group start as well. I'm gonna make this a circle and rotate that 90 degrees. So this is gonna be like our little petri dish. And if we hit play, we have a lot of particle coming out of that. So let's select the particle emitter and we just want to shoot one particle. And we don't want this particle to have any speed. So let's go back, hit play, and here we have our little particle. So let's go to the group now and set the size to 2, and we want to draw the radius. So now that we have the particle, we wanna use that as a new emitter. So to do that, we're gonna add a reproduce. So let's drop that into the start here. So it's only affecting this particle. And let's call that one primary trailhead. Copy that and name the group the same way. We want to emit randomly and we don't want no speed on this one. Let's hit play. So here all the particles are on top of each other. So this is why we only see one of them. And what we could add here is some turbulence. And now, as you can see, the turbulence is moving everything, and you have all those orange particles. So we want this to only affect the primary trailhead here. So let's set this to 2 as well and show the radius. And maybe here we want to add a new color mapper. So maybe those are red, okay? So what we want is we want them to be only flat on the ground here. So to do that, we're going to add a new math node, add that to the primary head group here. In the operation, we want to assign a value of 0 on the position and on the Y position. So now everything stays flat on the floor. We don't want this to emit constantly, so we're going to add a condition. We're going to call that primary and drop that inside the condition. We want to emit when the particle is less than 100 frames. But not only that, we don't want as much particles, so we're gonna change the chances here to be something around 5%. And the particles have way too much energy, so let's add a friction to calm everything down. And so they are already slower now. So maybe we want to set this to a higher number, maybe 200. And we could adjust the turbulence as well. So maybe the strength is only 2. Let's try a different scale. Then we want to add a constant flow of particle. So let's add a reproduce. And this is going to be primary trail. I want this to be per particle. I want this to be constant and continuous. And then in the properties here, we don't want any speed. Let's move that particle group, and this is going to be the primary trail. So yeah, this is tracing some particles on the ground. Let's make this a little bigger. So let's select the trail now, and in the color, we want to inherit the parent color. Here we have this little petri dish, and we don't want the particles to be able to get out of that. So let's add a field condition with a spherical field. Set the inner radius to be 100%, and when this condition is met, I'm gonna use shift to add this kill operation. So let's hit play, and so here we have nothing, simply because we have to invert that. So now when the head particle is hitting the limit, it's killed by this condition and the simulation stops there. Okay, and we don't want those particles to be running over each other. So to do that, we're gonna use a predator-prey system. Let's select the predator-prey here. Go to the object, and in the predator group, the predators are gonna be the trails. So primary trail, and the trails are gonna be the trailheads. So those bigger particles are gonna try avoiding the smaller ones. So here everything is gonna get crazy, and the reason for that is these little dots here are gonna push this away each frame, and we don't want that. So we wanna leave that a little moment to activate. So to do that, we're just gonna have a switch group in the primary trail, and we're gonna set this to group active, and we're gonna add a new particle group. Okay, so this is gonna be the primary trail active. I'm gonna drag another color mapper here, so control drag here, and this is gonna be orange, something a little bit different for radius on this one. And so to switch here, we're gonna use another condition. When the particle age is greater than 5 maybe, it's gonna switch to the active version. Okay, so as you can see, we have a few red ones, and then they switch to orange. So now in the predator prey here, let's set the pursuit strength to 0. And instead of using the trail, we want to use the trail active. So maybe for the trail here, I don't want to inherit the color, but I want like something in between orange and red. This is going to be more towards the yellow. Maybe I don't want this to start here, so let's go to the start emitter, select another seed and see where this happens. Yeah. Okay. Next, what I want is having those be able to branch out. So to do that, we're gonna add a new condition and a new reproduce here. Okay. So it's creating a particle group for us, but we don't want that. We want to use the particle trail head that you already have. So this is adding new particles to this head group. So this is going to be primary trail branch. Oh, in fact, we don't want a simple condition, we want a time condition. Okay, so let's use that instead. We want this to be a pulse. We don't want this to start right at the beginning, so let's offset that by 50 frames, for example, and we want the pulse to be 1 frame with a gap of 25 frames. So every second it's gonna trigger this emission. We want to distribute that, so it's gonna pick a branch and emit a particle from there. For the properties here, I'm gonna set the speed to 0. I want to emit in random direction, and I want to inherit the speed of the original particle and a little bit of the direction. Maybe it's taking too much direction here and maybe too much speed, so let's change those. Okay, so we have some branching going on. Maybe make this happen every 5 frames, but instead of 100% chance, we only have 20%. It's happening more often, but we have less chance of it dividing the particles. Okay, maybe it's still too much, so let's say 10%. Those are going quite straight, so maybe if we add a random field inside the turbulence, and let's see the view plane here, and in the fields here you want to make this bigger, something like that. Okay, let's hide the random field now. For the flee strength here in the predator prey, maybe we want this to be a little lower, so let's see how that looks now. So maybe let's just reduce that a little bit so we have less primary head here. And then the branching, let's maybe change the start frame to 100. Let's go back to every second. And there is 100% chance of this happening. So I think those are too straight because the predator prey is pushing them apart too strongly. Those first particles here are pushing those away. Let's just go to the trail here. Here I'm gonna call this switch group. And instead of 5 frames here, I'm gonna make this 20 frames. So they are changing group later. The turbulence is more in there. Okay, you have to play with those settings to get something because, yeah, so let's say maybe 15. I'm just gonna deactivate this branching for a while. I'm gonna change the seed on the head here because I don't like the flow of those main particles. So, okay, something else we could change here is the kind of noise we are using in the random field. So let's show that and let's go with something else. Okay, let's try that. You can experiment with that and different noises will give you different results. Something else, we don't want them to stack up as much as you can have them here. To do that, we're just gonna add a new blocking. Okay, so this is nice, but it's not what I was expecting. So let's add this inside the primary head here. Place that after the turbulence. So yeah, for the flocking here, I don't want no cohesion strength. I want a little bit of separation. So maybe 5 centimeters and a value of 0.1. So this way, those red dots here are trying to avoid each other as well. And I don't want that to happen right away. So I'm gonna add a new condition. Drop the flock in there, and this is gonna be age, and I want this to happen only if the age is greater than 100 frames. So now that we have that, you can see that those are really tangled up. So what we could do is add a new killing condition between the primary trail and the primary trail active. Here we want to add a group in between. I'm gonna add a new particle group. I'm gonna control drag this switch here, call that kill. So this first switch is gonna switch to this particle group, and this one is gonna switch to the active. We're just gonna make this really obvious by adding a color mapper, and I'm gonna set this to blue maybe. After 15 frames, the particle is gonna get into the kill group. And then after maybe 17 frames, this is gonna go to the primary trail active group. So we don't see that really well, but here you have two dots. So let's say particle group, kill. Here you can see that we have two particles that are blue. We don't need two, but only one. So in this switch group here, we're gonna go back to 16. So this is our little particle killer. We could use that as a field condition. So we want this to be happening in the head because we want to kill the head. So this is going to be kill condition slow, for example, because when those slow down, let's see, let's get this one. So as you can see here, it's slowing down. And so this particle is really close to this one. And this will allow us to kill it instead of doing whatever she wants. Kill slow is going to use the particle group. Let's call that maybe primary kill. Okay. So the condition here is going to use the primary kill. We're going to use a kill here. So here we're going to set this up a little bit and select the kill here. And we don't want such a big radius. Maybe we want something that's just 3 centimeters. I'm going to just try another seed for this one. And let's see. Okay, so here what's happening is because this kill action is taking place right away and we want to give it some time to activate. So guess what? So this is going to be the kill condition active. I'm going to add this condition inside this one. And here I want the age to be greater than 55 frames. Okay, and here this one should be killed. Okay. So maybe this condition could be a bit stronger. So maybe the kill condition here is going to be 5. Okay, so and once we got that, we want to have smaller branches. We're going to need the head, the trail, the kill particle here, and the active. And I'm going to control drag this here. I shift middle click everything here so I can select everything that's in there. And let's go to the tools and we're gonna get the renaming and I'm gonna replace primary. I'm gonna try to spell this correctly and I'm gonna call this secondary. Then hit replace and we have a whole new setup to work with. So that's pretty nice. Okay, so we want to spawn those somehow and this is happening in the primary head. And here we have the branching and we're going to use the same kind of branching system here. But for the condition, instead of using that, we're going to say, so let's call that secondary. Bring this one in there, delete the old condition. And here we want to say if the age is greater than 25 frames, there is a 5% chance of branching each time. So this is going to use the secondary trailhead. We just need to maybe change the colors a bit in the primary trail branch here. Let's set the radius to 0.5. So then in the head here, we want this to be maybe a darker blue here. Okay. So here in the head, we want to emit a secondary trail. So let's go inside the blue ones, make a lighter blue. And we want this to be 0.5 as well. Then the secondary trail, this is gonna switch to the kill particle, which is gonna be maybe some orange color. And then we're gonna switch to the active. This one will have a really bright blue color, like so. It seems to be working. but I would like to see those follow the main direction a little more. So I forgot to rename this one secondary branch. And so maybe those are gonna have more direction inheritance and maybe a lot more speed inheritance. Okay, so maybe on those I want less friction. So this is gonna be the friction for the primary head. I'm gonna control drag this one in the secondary head group, set the strength to be a bit lighter. So for those, I wanna add some kill conditions because I don't want them to go all over the place. So we already have the kill condition here. So let's make this smaller maybe. So here, when they hit the secondary kill particle, they die. But we also want them to die when they hit the primary trail active and the secondary trail active. So let's see. So this was 5 centimeters. Let's try 5 centimeters for those. This is gonna be add and this is gonna be add. So okay, maybe we want those now to branch a little more often. Okay, so let's go back here and set this secondary here to something higher. So let's say 10% here. So here we have more secondary branches. Okay, so and for the branching here, we're gonna say that starting at frame 0 for a duration of 1, every 3 frames, we're gonna have a new branch. Okay. Yeah, and maybe on those one we don't need the flocking option. Okay, so let's delete this. Okay, and let's adjust the kill condition here, and maybe we don't want this secondary kill for now, and just keep that like so. Alright, so now we could start speaking about rendering that. So to do so, we're gonna start with a volume builder, and using Alt, I'm gonna drop that inside a volume measure. Let's select the volume builder, go to the objects, we're gonna log that. We're gonna select all the groups and drop them inside the objects here. I'm gonna deactivate the builder here and hit play. So let's activate the builder. Let's start with the voxel size here. So let's set this maybe to 0.5. So this gives us more resolution. So maybe we don't need the start group here. Let's uncheck the lock here. So the primary head will be 1 centimeter and the trails are gonna be 0.7 maybe. For the secondary head here, we wanna set this to 0.8 and those will be 0.6. Alright, and so let's deactivate the builder. Let's play. And let's activate the builder again. And so this is why the geometry here is gonna be handy. If we just want to see the volume, we can just click that. Maybe the volume builder here could be 0.2 to have even more detail and capturing the thickness here a little better. And in the volume measure, we could play with the threshold here. So maybe we're gonna adjust those, and for the primaries here, we're gonna set this to 0.8. Okay, so some of those are a bit too spread out. So maybe what we could add here is an SDF smooth. So let's bring down the strength on this one until we are starting to capture more detail. So maybe we want to be really small just to get some of those holes coming back. So maybe here we want to have some more smoothing on the remeshing. And to do so, we're gonna just select a smoothing deformer. So to get the right shape here, you're gonna have to play with the smoothing here, which is smoothing the geometry. and the smoothing here, which is smoothing the volume. All of these smoothing is depending on the density here. So if you have a smaller value here for the field, so let's see. So here the mesh is really dense. So here you're going to have to smooth a little more. So yeah, this is something you have to keep in mind. I'm going to go back and keep my voxel size like so. And maybe I want to change the smoothing here. So we could play with the stiffness and the iterations as well. So a good idea here would be to cache this particle simulation. We could always go back and change that, but for now, I'm just gonna select all the particle groups. Maybe not 1000 frames, but 500. Let's cache this in. Okay, and here I'm just gonna add a new cache and call that blob. So this is gonna take a few seconds. By doing that, we don't have to wait for simulation and we can just scroll through. It's pretty quick. So if you want to change something here, we're gonna have to select the groups and clear object cache. I'm not gonna do that right now. Let's add a simple plane. So this is gonna be the floor plane. I'm gonna add a new standard material. It's gonna be the floor. Assign that to the floor. Let's keep it like so. I want the reflection to be pretty rough. Okay, so for the lighting, I just added a dome light. And I just imported my favorite HDRI. And let's see how this looks now. And I'm gonna just select all those groups and I want the render visibility to be off. And so now we are just rendering the volume measure. So here the floor is cutting them in half. That was okay for me, but if you want, you could also add in a cube, for example, and use that to cut the bottom part of the measure. You could select the measure, bring in the cube here, and set that to subtract. I like this one, so let's go back to that. Okay, so for the rendering now, I just created a new material. This is gonna be the blob material. Let's open that up. So I used a tinted glass here. Drop that on the measure. Okay, so here, maybe in the subsurface, we don't want red, but we could try something else, like kind of orange. Okay, maybe we want to dial back the refraction here. Okay, so for the detailing, let's double click and search for maximum noise. Select the material, go to the overall tab, control click this little dot, and here we got the bump map. Let's double click here and we want a bump map. Connect that to the bump, connect the noise. So let's select the maximum noise and go for an FBM noise. Just connect this to the surface to see how this is mapped. Okay, and maybe we want this to be a bit bigger. Let's see how this looks. Connect this to the surface. So what we want to do here is maybe add a curvature. So let's connect the curvature to the surface. So I want to consider the same object only, and maybe we want convex AL. We could also double click and add a scalar ramp, connect that to the alt input and connect that to the surface. Okay, and so this is giving us this curve. Then by playing with this curve, we're gonna say, okay, those parts are where the bump happens. And then what you could do is selecting those, double click and go for a color layer. So we're gonna keep the base color and we want to add this noise as a color for layer 1 and we're gonna use that as a mask. So let's connect that to the surface. Here we can just change the ramp. So let's see if we pipe this into the bump map and we connect that to the surface. This is much more interesting. And then you could play with the noise overall scale here. Okay, so let's make this a little more interesting, and we can add a new particle system here. So let's clear the cache, deactivate the geometry only and the volume builder. Let's go to the start here. Using shift, we're gonna add a new condition. Still using shift, you're gonna add a new reproduce, and this is gonna be spheres. So let's bring that over here. So maybe we want to control drag the color mapper here and set this to a different color. For the condition here, if the age is less than maybe 200 frames, we're going to be generating those spheres. Maybe we want a little offset with a variance. We don't want no speed. Then in the spheres, we want to do the radius. Okay, so here we have the purple spheres. We don't want them to be stacked on each other. So we're gonna add a flag here in the spheres. And we're gonna change this. So we want some cohesion, but not too much. For this separation here, we want this to be quite low. So maybe 0.5. Let's see how this looks. So maybe this needs some friction with a really high number. Okay, so those are stacking up now. So in the spheres, we're going to add another condition. If the age is less than 5 frames, using shift, I'm going to add a math. And here I'm going to multiply the radius by 1.1. So this is going to make them grow over time for 5 frames. Those are too big. So let's go back to the spheres, go to the radius, and this is going to be 0.3. So let's unfold that, and we want a variation of 0.1. Okay, so we get some variation. Maybe the condition here is a bit too limited, so maybe we want that on 11 frames. Okay, so let's set that to 100. And what we would like here is maybe having those spheres. Also, when we are having those splits in the main tentacles, we're gonna just select the sphere condition here. Okay, let's call that sphere. And we want to control drag this condition sphere in here. And as you can see here, when we are spawning a new branch, we are starting to add those purple spheres. I'm just going to add a new cloner. Using shift, I'm going to add a sphere in there, and I'm going to set this to equals Adrian. Go to the object tab and select the mode, set this to object. And for the object, what we want is the sphere group. Here we want the particle scale to be 100. And for the sphere, we want this to be 1 centimeter. Okay, so this is getting the radius from the particles. Then from here, we're just gonna go to the volume builder and bring in the cloner. Let's activate the volume builder. We want the geometry only. Just hide that. Yeah, what I want to say here is we are losing too much of the shape. The volume builder voxel size here is too low. Let's say 1.5. Let's move this cloner to the spheres here. So let's select the spheres and make an instance of that. So let's select the instance here, and using shift, you're gonna add a plane. Let's G the cloner here so we can hide that and still see the instance here. Okay, so let's uncheck the position, use the scale, use uniform scale, and this is going to be minus 0.1, and the deformer should be on objects. Okay, minus, I don't know, 0.5. And we're going to have to add a material to that. So let's double click. Let's add this to the instance here. And for the spheres, I want to add some emission. Okay, so let's bring that up. Okay, so if it's not rendering properly here, it's maybe because we have this sphere cloner here that's not showing up. Okay, so let's hide the null. Maybe we don't want no emission at all, in fact. Or just a little bit. I don't know. I don't know. You could play with the emission and the base color. Okay, so what if we now want to apply that to a 3D model? So I got this guy from the 3dscans.com. So this is a pretty high-res mesh, as you can see. So first thing I'm gonna do is drop that inside a remesh. Here I wanna use the Z remesher and drop the density to 20%, for example, and the adaptiveness to 90. This is gonna take a while to process. Once you're happy with the remeshing, you can just right click on the remesher and current state to object, which gives you a new mesh. I've already done that. That's the result. And so this low res mesh is going to be much easier for the particle system to handle because we're going to add a collision on that. Then I copy pasted that inside my document and scaled that up according to my basic circle here. And now instead of using this start emitter, I'm going to delete that and I want to select my mesh. And this time we're going to use a mesh emitter. So the geometry is already in here. For the particle group, it created this one, but we don't want that. We want to use the original one here. So let's go to the properties and drag in the start group. So we have a few problems already. So what we want here is the emitter. We want this to have no speed. So those are not flying around like that. Something else here, we just want a shot. So we don't want this to be happening all the time, but just once. So here we still have this condition that's killing the particles outside the sphere. So let's uncheck that. And what I would like to do is emitting from a specific zone on the mesh. So to do that, we're gonna need a polygon selection. In the polygon selection, we're gonna use the transfer and we want a spherical field. So just to see what we are selecting here, I'm just gonna double click, make a new material. Maybe I want this red. I want to assign this new selection to the material. And so this way we can see what we are doing. And maybe we want to spawn particles from here. And in the mesh emitter, we're gonna restrict that to this selection. And if I now hit play, we are only spawning on the face. Okay, let's say we want just one particle. Okay, but we still have another issue. Those particles are restricted on the Y position. And so this is the math node doing that. So let's uncheck that and uncheck this one. And we're gonna use a surface attract instead. So let's have one here and another one here. You wanna make sure that those are happening after the turbulence. So if I hit play now, you can see that this is still not working. And this is because we're gonna need to add a simulation collider tag on this one. So this is gonna use now the surface as a collision object. So before rendering that, I would recommend selecting all the objects here and cache scene. So this can take a little while, but it's going to be easier to work when you're trying to place your cameras, and so you don't have to re-simulate all the particles. Just keep in mind that every time you cache the scene again, it's going to add more files in the cache folder. So just so you know. Okay, so we could continue tweaking this forever, but I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. So thanks for watching and see you in the next one. Bye.